So tell me a little bit more about what you learned through the interviews of various veterans and their experience in Laos.
Well, the thing is that for the protection of those veterans, I can't mention their names, but the information that I got from them led me to find things in the archives, particularly the archives in Kew in London, which I would not otherwise have found because I wouldn't have known what to look for. So, for example, I found out from the files in London that we were actually going to use the airfield to help to carry out an invasion of Laos, and my unit would have been sent in there to go across the Mekong into Laos. But I found this out originally from a British colonel who told me the truth about that's what the airfield was for. So I went looking for, words like intervention and plan and invasion and so forth, and I found the files about this.
Why were they wanting to invade Laos?
Well, they said, we always have this sort of propaganda problem with accusations in the mirror. They said that the Pathet Lao would take over Laos, then they'd sweep through the whole of Thailand and Malaysia and Singapore, and they'd come down and attack Australia. Oh dear, very fearful, because Australians are very easily frightened about, human tides of Asians. There's a sort of racist fear. And actually, all they wanted was their own country back. And that's what they were fighting for. When they managed to reach Vientiane, they set up a government, and they didn't get. There never was a threat of them doing the dominoes and going through the rest of Asia. They didn't have the energy or resources to do anything like that.
Could that have been propaganda, though, used to galvanise support for an invasion? Could the invasion have been for Vietnam to go in, perhaps, the back door of Vietnam?
You see, the invasion of Laos was part of the whole thing of the war in Vietnam. They actually did do an invasion from the Vietnam side, and they had a whole lot of Vietnamese troops, and Australian planes were used to bomb right up to the border of Vietnam, but they weren't allowed to cross over. American planes went over Laos, and they were bombing the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and they fought very hard, but the South Vietnamese were actually beaten by the Laos, and so that was a terrible disaster from the point of view of the Americans who were running the whole show.
And I think what's interesting too is if you look underneath all of this and you look at the military strategies of power over the enemy, for example, the psychology of war, where one has to be more militarily stronger than the other in order to win, and when they win, they're able to get what they want. So it's not dissimilar to a bullying type approach that we find these days in schools, where a child will bully another child to get what they want, to feel a sense of power.
It's much more than that, because we're talking about using B-52 bombers, cluster bombs and high explosive bombs and napalm and white phosphorus and Agent Orange against people who didn't even have an air force, didn't have anti-aircraft guns at the beginning, didn't have missiles, but they actually, the Pathet Lao actually managed to shoot down 2,500 American planes over the 10 years period that they were being attacked. But basically, we're talking about bullying by a superpower which had all of the tools of modern warfare and more than anybody else, by far, against people who lived in bamboo huts.
Could it be described in psychological terms as pathological? Because I know certainly within the bullying area we talk about psychopaths in corporate areas who have no compassion and no care for the person that they try and have control over, because clearly using these types of weapons which are completely disproportionate, not to mention the damage that's done to people through these weapons, seems an incredible thing to do. What's your view about the weaponry used in warfare?
Well, modern industrialised warfare uses what I term egregious weapons, ones that inflict unnecessary suffering. You could just kill people with bullets, but they go very much further and cause agonising pain and shred people's bodies up and so forth like this.
What's the purpose of that?
I think that the whole psychology of, killing at a distance, like if you're just dropping bombs out of a B-52 bomber, you can't even see the ground because you're above the clouds. Just bombing areas where you know that it's just a rural area with a few small villages and people farming, that you're intentionally destroying their food crops, intentionally destroying their livelihoods and breaking up their communities. There's a lack of empathy there, and there is a pathology of being psychopathic. But the main thing these people get taught is don't think about the other people that you're attacking. Just think of those people like they were vermin, or in Rwanda they used the word cockroaches. General Westmoreland said that the Oriental people didn't fear death, that it was quite a small thing for them. But he had no idea of grieving mothers and children who'd lost their parents and parents that had lost their children and just cried and cried for years. And when people go back there and meet some of the people that they were fighting against, and meet some of the people who are warm, friendly human beings who are trying to live life in very harsh conditions and very difficult circumstances, and have something to say about what was done to them.